Greetings everyone, I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion, as you can tell from the title, continuing my random reviews of episodes of various Star Trek shows. It's going to be another Deep Space Nine episode this time. Season 1, Episode 10, The Nagus. And as you can tell from that title, this is going to be the first appearance of Wallace Shawn as Grand Nagus Zek. You fell victim to one of the classic blunders! Before I get too far into it, just a reminder, if you wish to support the channel, both the PayPal and Patreon links are down below. With the Patreon, if you join, regardless of the tier, you'll gain access to videos early, and you'll also be able to suggest topics for future videos. Heck, if there's a Star Trek episode that you want me to cover that I haven't yet, you can always put that in and I'll watch it. Don't make me watch Code of Honor again. I've already reviewed it, in case you're wondering. And if you just want to do one-off support or a one-off request, go to PayPal link. Either way, every little bit helps the channel. Now, this episode was directed by David Livingston. He would direct multiple episodes after this. The three that caught my mind were Rules of Acquisition, another Ferengi-related one for the following season. Dr. Bashir, I presume, the episode that was a spoof of James Bond. And it got Paramount in hot water with MGM, but I'll cover that once I get to that episode, because that is one of the ones that I am going to cover already. There is episodes of all the shows that I already have on the list that I do want to review. For the original one, in case you're wondering, yes, Space Heat is on there. And you are cordially invited. The episode where Dax weds Worf. That one's going to have some interesting notes once I get to it. The teleplay is by Ira Stephen Bear from a story developed by him and Livingston. Now, originally this story featured the Klingons, the Romulans, the Vulcans, and several other new races visiting Deep Space Nine to establish a new criminal syndicate, which would have been an interesting episode, especially when you got Vulcans in there. Usually a very logical sounding one, but I guess the funds would be too good. It's like joining this venture was most logical. But they decided to modify it specifically to feature the Ferengi, and all things considered, I think it was the right case, because we get some nice world building with the Ferengi. As like I said in the last review, this show is what started to help fix the Ferengi. I mean, with TNG after a point, they took them and made them comedic characters, even if occasionally they were still Then, mainly with the character of Quark, they started to heal him with this show. And with this episode, they start to heal him even more and expand upon the whole Ferengi culture. Make it more than just like space goblins. Now, just from reading the comment section on YouTube, it seems a lot of fans really wanted to skip the Ferengi episodes, or would they watch them and they're like, oh, it's another Ferengi episode in Deep Space Nine. But I agree with another subsect of the fans that the Ferengi episodes are always fun. I mean, we got this, Rules of Acquisition, House of Quark, which that's a Ferengi / Klingon episode, so that's like half and half. Little Green Men. You gotta love Quark, Ramen, Nog time traveling. That one is on the list, by the way. And of course, all the ones involving Ishka, especially the Magnificent Ferengi. And of course, you gotta love Jeffrey Combs, which he shows up as Brunt FCA. And I'm getting a little off track, but I just love the Ferengi in this show. Now, this one starts that world building, because as I mentioned at the top, this is the first appearance of Grand Nagus Zek, and the first hint that they actually have a ruler. The Grand Nagus is the head of state for the Ferengi Alliance, and he basically approves a lot of financial dealings. And however he decides to go with his financial dealings, so go the rest of Ferenginar. And it shows a lot of other different Ferengi, one of which, of course, is Zek's son, Krax, played by Lou Wagner, who played Lucius in the first Planet of the Apes. Which, a little funny thing, this is the first and only mention of Krax in the whole show, because Wallace would appear as Zek in multiple episodes throughout the course of the show, usually just once per season, because apparently he really didn't like having to sit through the makeup process. There was a quote somewhere about it, but I didn't put it in here, but it's usually like a 2 to 3 hour process before, and then working 12-hour days on set, so I could see why he wouldn't want to do it multiple times. But have appreciation for those who did it, like Armin Shimerman. But he's perfect as Zek. And of course, Tiny Ron as Made Her Do. They always appear together. his servant. He's mainly known for playing heavy characters like Rock, that's R-O-C, in Ace Ventura, and Lothar in The Rocketeer. Which a fun thing about that is he also appeared alongside Max Grodinchek in The Rocketeer, and his character killed Grodinchek's character in that film. It's been so long since I've seen that film, I guess I forgot about that, but that's one thing as you go back and rewatch films and all that. I'll have to rewatch that film sometime down the road. Then you got a handful of other Ferengi characters in this episode. We got Grawl, played by Lee Arnberg, who a lot of you will recognize as Patel from the Pirates of the Caribbean films. And of course, as the unfortunate robber from RoboCop 3. If you don't know who the unfortunate robber is, he's the one that decides he's going to be a rocket scientist and try to rob a diner that is filled with a lot of Detroit's finest. You got Barry Gordon playing Nava, who he's the only member of the cast that I have met so far. Because if you don't recognize that name and you can't even recognize his voice even with the makeup, Barry Gordon is the voice of Donatello in the 1980s cartoon. And I don't have the thing up, so I don't see quite how the camera is angled, but if you guys can see it, I met him last year, and his signature is up on that poster right there. I'm not going to pull it down and all that, but he's a nice guy. Nice talking to him in the Q&A that him and the rest of the cast did. Was pretty fun about how he's one of the ones that actually uses his normal speaking voice talking as Donatello. And I'm going to say his normal speaking voice really does fit a turtle character, so he can get away with it. And like I said, with Lou Wagner, they're all good for their roles. Of course, Barry Gordon has the honor of being in the scene that is a homage to The Godfather, which I'm getting a little ahead of myself there. Now, there's an A and a B plot in this episode, as there is in a lot of the Deep Space Nine episodes. I'll cover the B plot first, because that's the plot focusing on the relationship between Commander Sisko's son Jake and Nog, their friendship. It had been established a little bit by this point, but this is the first episode that centers around it a lot. Part of it is Nog really doesn't like going to school. It's that whole little dynamic with the Ferengi culture and their beliefs and traditions are clashing with Starfleet's. I mean, he wants to try to do it, but he doesn't like doing the homework. And when he's in school and covering for Keiko, we got Chief O'Brien asking if they did their homework, and the way he's grilling him, you can tell that he doesn't believe him, but he doesn't have a lot of proof, so he's like telling him yeah. And Nog asks Jake to cover for him. Jake doesn't want to, but he reluctantly does, as you know, friends. And as it goes along and the A-plot goes, Nog decides he's going to pull back, no longer go to school, and there's tension between Jake and Nog there. And part of it continues with Sisko, talking with Jake, seeing that Jake wants to hang around with his son, with Nog a bit more, talking with Chief O'Brien, and O'Brien's like, yeah, if he was my son, I wouldn't really want him to hang around with him either. And Sisko says something good, is like, if I try to force them apart, it's only going to push them together more. I mean, we're both parents talking here, but remember, your daughter's only 3 right now. Wait till she's 14 and you try to do that. It's not as easy. Which is true. If you try to force friendships apart for certain reasons, it doesn't work as well. Now, if it's a valid reason, you can, because you can put your foot down on it. Now, at school, you might not be able to do it as long as they're at the same school, but outside of it, you can. Be like, I do not want you hanging out with him anymore. Like I said, valid reason. With Nog, you can kind of see there's a valid reason a little bit because of his whole leaning into the Ferengi qualities. But I like the nice little moment at the end where Sisko's going to look for him because he thinks they're up to no good. They might be in the middle trying to steal some stuff like we saw Nog doing in the pilot episode. But no, what Jake is doing is he's actually helping Nog with the school stuff. Looks like he's trying to help him read. Which, it's one of those things that, like, really? Ferengi wouldn't really want people to read? You have to be able to at least read and comprehend what you're reading in order to make a good business deal. So being able to read should be cherished in Ferengi culture. But again, this might go into one of the theories that a lot of other people like Lore Runner have about there being a lot of stupid Ferengi and they're mainly kept afloat by the smart Ferengi, like we see Zek. And a little bit of Quark. But Quark, he's a smart Ferengi that also happens to have a conscience. And as he says in a later episode, I'm a people person. And of course, that's going to come back to bite him in his butt in another Ferengi episode where we actually see his cousin Grilka. Yeah, Grilka is a very important Ferengi. That guy owns his own moon. And that's more or less with the B-plot. It's an interesting B-plot, nice little dynamic between Jake and Nog. Like this shows that despite the fact he can get a little authoritarian because he is a commander, and also because of how he is played. Sisko backing off a little bit with it, nice. Shows that he is an understanding parent. The A-plot is where it's at in this episode, though. That's what carries most of it. The Nagus and his son show up on Deep Space Nine, and they're there on business. Now, they don't really get around to talking about it a lot. In the first couple scenes with the Nagus, it's mainly Crack's doing all the talking, and Zek's letting him go. So you wonder, like, can Zek talk? Is Crack's leading him along? Is there something wrong with him up here? Which, just as a little aside there, we're going to find out in a couple seasons' time there is actually something wrong with him up here. But we don't know if he had it this far back, but he might have been starting to show. I mean, if Alzheimer's in humans could start to slowly show years before it fully develops, a similar condition in Ferengi, I would not be surprised. So there might be a lot more to what he says later on in the meeting. Goes in the hollow suites. He stays in Rom's room. And they invite more Ferengi, and more Ferengi slowly show up. Which, of course, puts everyone on the station on, not high alert, but they start to note, because, like, this many Ferengi on the station, they might be up to something. Specifically, of course, Odo, because he's watching, like, he usually is like, more Ferengi. I'll keep my eye on them. And they have a big old business deal, which I think that whole scene is on YouTube, so I'm going to try to, if I find it, I'll try and put it down below. Nice little scene where Zek is leading, like, profits have never been higher. And now with the wormhole, they have a very good opportunity, because now they can start selling stuff in the Gamma Quadrant. And the main advantage there would be no one has heard of the Ferengi. And as one of them puts it, our word could be our bond until we decide to break it. Which, of course, reminds me of one of the rules of acquisition, which, as another aside, that's another thing I love about this episode, is this is the first time we hear of the rules of acquisition. The one I'm about to quote is not mentioned in this episode, but they introduce it. That, of course, is a contract is a contract is a contract, but only between Ferengi. Which, of course, the implication there being, hey, you can make a contract with anybody, but you can only hold it 100% with a Ferengi. Which is kind of interesting, because I believe the last rule of acquisition is supposed to be, deep down, everybody's a Ferengi, so shouldn't you honor it with everybody? But that's going to depend on how you decide to hold yourself as a business person, I guess. So all the Ferengi are happy, but then Zek's like, yeah, I'm going to be stepping down. And he mentions the other reason that he is holding this meeting is to name his successor. Of course, everyone thinks, oh, it's going to be Cracks, or it's going to be one of the other ones. But here is where he decides to swerve them, bro. Instead of any of them, it is Quark. Now, they've been having this meeting at Quark's in the big room. He's had it set up. He had to chase Morn away, which I didn't mention Morn in the pilot. But Morn, he's one of those background characters that's always fun to watch. Most of the time, he's only there in the background as a set dressing. Quark or the others talk with him. Does not say any lines, although I think that adds to his appeal, especially when we hear the other characters talk about him. Like the Axe at one point mentioned she had a crush on him. Find out, I guess, he practices bathleth fighting with Worf when Worf shows up in one of the hollow suites, and other amazing stuff. And, of course, what we find out about his past in the episode Who Mourns for Morn. He's just one of those characters that whole following around him, it kind of would lessen it a bit if we actually saw him do any of this stuff on screen. So him just being there works of it. And then Quark having to shoo him away. So Quark's just mainly working there in the background, listening to stuff, not expecting to play a part. But the moment Zek announces Quark is going to be the new Nagus, kind of his eyes light up. He's like, me? But all the other Ferengi are so mad, like, he's an amateur! And they storm off. But then once it sets in, the butt kissing begins. They start like, oh, Nagus Quark, oh yeah, I'll be help to you. And of course, someone gives him some advice. that, alright, you're the new Nagus, you're going to have to deal with everybody else. And of course he goes to Zek for some advice, but when Zek gives him advice, Zek dies. Of course, the reason I say dies in quotation marks, because if it's not obvious by the fact I said he reappears later, he's not dead. This is part of the test, but even with that knowledge, watching it the first time, you're like, why would the Grand Nagus fake his death? We all know why he would name Quark as his successor, apparently, to do it, because then it put a lot of the attention on Quark, so that Zek could plan in the background and let whatever reason he's there for come out. Now, with all this, Quark starts to let the power go to his head, like, oh yes, I am Grand Nagus Quark. I'm all out. I love holding the staff. And Armin Shimerman plays it beautifully. He's acting, you can tell he's the same character, acting a little bit more pompous and thinking high of himself, so it's not like how he was, like super like that, but you can tell it's the same character established in the first episode that we've seen, and various scenes throughout that episode leading to this episode. But really letting everything go to his head. Or, to use the Ferengi term, letting it go to his lobes. Which, of course, once he decides, like, alright, I'm going to have to put my foot down with this. That's where we get the scene that is reminiscent of The Godfather. Where we get Nava on one side of the desk. You got Krax and Rom right behind him, supposed to be the heavies. Which, of course, it's obvious why Rom is there. Rom's his brother and one of the few people he can actually trust. Even though that kind of goes with one of the rules of acquisition, which I'll mention in a bit, that's mentioned in this episode. And of course, Quark's on the other side of the table petting some strange alien thing. Which, of course, that already is reminiscent of The Godfather with Don Corleone sitting there with the cat. But then he says something like, but now you call me Nagus. That's where it seals it. And I just love how this episode's blocked, how the cameras are angled and the way it's played. And then, of course, even down to the whole kissing of the staff thing. That's like kissing the Godfather's ring. So you just love it. A cinephile like me especially, even though I haven't seen The Godfather in about 15 years, just watching that, I'm like, oh, I love this scene. I'll probably try to put that scene down in the comment section below, because I know that one definitely is up on YouTube. And he gets a good deal. He gets half of what Nava was going to go do. Introduce Synthahol to the Gamma Quadrant, getting half of it. That's a pretty good deal. Although he probably could have gone a little bit more and got 60. But as a new Nagus, 50-50 is a pretty good deal. Now, with letting everything go to his head, it's pretty obvious Quark is going to quickly make some enemies. Which he does, one of course being Krax, because Krax was like, I'm Zek's son, I should have been Grand Nagus, me. And of course, he starts to really whisper in Rom's ear, because I didn't watch the episodes between 1 and 10, but one little subplot that comes up every now and then is that Rom wants to be of more importance in the bar. He really wants to be running it when Quark either dies or when he's off. And this is an episode that partially establishes that, and Quark just laughs him off, like one scene where he's like, oh, I figured since you were so busy being Nagus that I could do the bar. You? The bar? And of course tied in with the fact that he's verbally abusive with him, which one of them is when he finds out from a guest that Rom had found her money pouch, giving it back, and he gets on him. You lobeless fool, what's the first rule of acquisition? Which the first rule is, once you have the money, you never give it back. Which, of course, to go with that in the way that they're talking about is like, Quark, that's theft. I don't think you really want a visit from Odo, especially since in the first episode you were told to run honest games. In case you're wondering, the other rule of acquisition is never let family stand in the way of opportunity, which is number 6. Which the reason I mentioned that is because that ties all into Rom's whole thing here. He's getting tired of it. He finally has a little breaking point. And with Krax whispering in his ear, he decides, like, you know what? Let's kill the Grand Nagus. Kill the Nagus! So they look like they're going to blow him out of an airlock, which is something that Quark had threatened to do with Rom, so nice little poetic justice there. Before they could do it, who should show up? But Odo, Mehardu, and Grand Nagus Zek. And we find out that Nagus' plan the whole time was to test and see if Krax was ready to take over, but he wasn't. Because he expected Krax to, like, be working with Quark, because even though Quark is good at all of his stuff, he doesn't really like a lot of the other stuff, so maybe he thought that, like, hey, Quark probably wouldn't mind being the front guy with it. Maybe let Krax, like, do some suggestions every now and then if it's a good idea. He'd probably like, alright, okay, we'll go with that. But nope. Instead, Quark decided we're going to do a coup d'etat using Rom as the front guy, which is not what he wanted, and he showed up right at the dead of time. Quark is taken off screen. Now, whatever happens to him after this, since he's never mentioned or seen again, it's up to you. Considering the whole political thing, you could always say that maybe he just left, or maybe the Nagus had him taken care of. You never know. It's up to you. Either one of those is great. I imagine if he was still around, he probably left later on when him and Quark technically become step siblings. As we'll find. I'll get to that later when we get to that part, but that's an interesting little dynamic there. Well, with that part, I guess you could say him and Rom already got their little sibling dynamic there and going against Quark. But the whole thing with Rom and his thing, I do love how in a very Ferengi manner, but very believable with how Grodenchek and Shimerman play off each other, is that you think that Quark is going to really lay into Rom like, you kill me, why don't you? But it kind of looks like it's going there, but he's like, I'm proud of you, Rom. I didn't think you had the lobes to do that. So instead of like throwing him out, firing him, instead he promotes him. So he's basically pulling a Ted with that. That took some balls. We need balls. I'm promoting you. And he makes him an assistant manager, and it's a position that he just made up on the spot, and they go and talk about it over a drink. So it's a nice little moment there. Shows that Ferengi culture can be a little weird in certain regards, but despite rule of acquisition number 6, Quark still cares about his brother. Which that's going to come back up again and again, that he does care about not just the family that's his genetically, but the family he adopts. Like, I mean, he's not going to say it this early on, but by the end of the show, he's going to say that a lot of the friends he's made on Deep Space Nine, they're essentially family. Sisko, Dax, a little bit Worf to a lesser extent, Bashir, all them, they're family. And there's only a couple bits of trivia that were on IMDb that I haven't mentioned so far. This is the episode that cements Rom's voice and his mannerisms. I mean, we had his look down in the first episode and who he was supposed to be, but this is where we really get the way he talks and the way he moves. Never will doubt the tarnish the lust for latinum, which is one of the reasons his character is so loved and he's so likable, just the way he talks. And then the way he's written, we see that he is a genius in certain regards as the show goes on, but not in a way that a typical Ferengi would be looked at. Like, he doesn't have the lobes for business, but later on, as we'll find out, he has the lobes for engineering. And this is also the first mention of the fire caves. They're called caverns by Sisko, but first mention of them, later on we'll find out they're the home of the Pa Wraiths, which I know there's a lot of fans that are not a whole fan of that whole thing, but we'll get to that when we get to that further down the road. And just a little thing to mention, as of right now, I actually am waiting on my DVD set of Deep Space Nine to arrive. Hopefully it'll be here by the time I record the next one. Reason for that is there's really not a point of watching it on Netflix other than just the convenience of pulling it on there and not having to switch discs when it is in standard definition. Now, at least with TNG and all them, without owning it, it makes sense to watch it in there. But also the fact that I don't want to be in the middle of, I'm going to get ready to watch it, and then find out, oh no, they already took it off, and I don't have Paramount Plus yet. Oh, drat. I just go, oh, they took it off. Oh, drat, where's that box at? That's kind of the reason why in the other series, which I have not gotten to the point of uploading these ones yet, but I will pretty soon, why I have been watching them with the DVD one, even though this one's less likely to be taken off. And also special features, so probably look to see what the features are on that one, and I might incorporate some of that stuff into my notes eventually. And of course, if there's a commentary, I might watch the episode twice. Once for the commentary, then once for that, and then just do my notes during the commentary run. Overall, another fun episode. Like I said at the top, I like how it continues to establish the Ferengi here. The B-plot is what it is. It's a B-plot, but does tie into the A-plot because it does deal with a Ferengi in the form of Nog. Do like how it shows the whole Jake relationship, shows Sisko as a competent parent. With the A-plot, introducing Zek, nice little moment. That whole thing starts establishing more of the lore and does some world building, as does the introduction of the rules of acquisition. It's kind of a minor thing that we never see cracks again after this, but it is what it is. All the actors that play Ferengi, they do it well within the makeup. It's always good to see Arnberg and Gordon on screen. I can't really think of any other times Gordon was on screen. I know at this time, I didn't put it in the notes, it's just something I remember, he was the president of the Screen Actors Guild, so it was a nice little thing there. Probably would have been a better in-joke if he was playing the Nagus, but I could see why they went with Shawn, because Shawn just got that voice. The most famous is never get involved in a bidding war with the Nagus! If only he'd actually been laughing like that and then just quit. That would have been a nice little Princess Bride Easter egg. That's really all I got to say about this one. So, till next time, guys, live long and prosper, and remember the rules of acquisition.